Yeah, well, the only reason Zelensky is not caving in at this point is because of the Europeans. And Zelensky has to work with the Europeans because they are closer to him. The Europeans can actually show his base of support and keep him in power. The only reason he's refusing to acquiesce to the pressure from Washington, D.C. is because of the Europeans. Because the Europeans want to be carried along. The Europeans also have their own interest. So it's not just about the interest of the United States. Well, Zelensky is caught between a rock and a hard place. But in his own interest, he has to work with the Europeans because it seems clearly that the government in Washington wants him out. That's what it looks like from the outside looking in. You know, if you're Zelensky and you're hearing statements from Washington saying you are not legitimate, that they want to do a deal to bring an end to the conflict, and the government in Washington is already telling you that you're not legitimate. What the emergency power that Zelensky has will be gone the moment there's a ceasefire, there's an agreement, and the conflict comes to an end. And this can be wrapped up in a matter of 2 months. So the music is going to stop in 2 months. 2 months. Thank you, Appel. The music can easily stop in 2 months if there's a deal in place. And the deal is forced upon Zelensky and Ukraine by the United States. So the Europeans on one hand are telling him that this is against your interests, do not do the deal, we want you to stay in power, America wants you gone. But the only way we can make the argument to keep you in power and prevent election in Ukraine is when we keep the conflict going. And believe that somehow, some way we can break the Russians, we can drag the conflict up until winter and slow the Russians down. And at that point, the French and the British will send in contingents. From what I'm hearing, that they're already doing some training exercises with the F-16 fighters and other, stealth fighter jets or planes in Romania. So they're believing that they are preparing and, putting together some fighting force to push back the Russians. Well, the main problem and the main challenge has always been the logistics and supply, because the Russians are supplying and replenishing at a faster rate than the Ukrainians. So it's easy for the Russians to keep this conflict going, to fight it out, in a war of attrition for the next 10 years. The Russians are very comfortable. The Russians are already on 28% or 24% of Ukrainian land. So they are not in a rush. And the southern part is secured. So the Russians can only gain more ground if the conflict goes on, because the Ukrainians need to remobilize, they need to recruit more men. And I'm wondering whether the British public will want to send 50,000 fighters to the battlefield, because 50,000 is nothing. They are liquidating them in a matter of 6 months. It's nothing. The Russians are losing 10 to 15,000 men in a month or thereabout. Ukraine is also losing that same amount. So, well, if you're going to send in some kind of constabulary force, and there's to fight the Russians in the war of attrition in Eastern Europe, where you need to have a chain of supply, particularly the Black Sea or even the Baltics, it's not a war that the Europeans can win. The Germans and the French and the British cannot win, because it is in proximity to Russia, and the Russians are very comfortable, like I said, in their position. And the Russians have a lot of comparative advantages. When it comes to electronic warfare and jamming, the Russians are very good. So this is what America is providing for Ukraine, and this is what the Europeans lack. The intelligence, the space presence, if you like, and the aerial intelligence that America is providing to Ukraine, the Europeans lack it. So at the end of the day, they need America to get involved in it. So if the Europeans are going to go to war with Russia and they want to sustain a war of attrition, it is not in their best interest. Well, America can be dragged into the conflict in Ukraine and dragged into the conflict in Iran at the same time. So America already have their troops thinly spread around the world. So it is not in the best interest of the United States of America to engage in a war of attrition with Russia in Europe. And like Trump said, there's a big, beautiful ocean between, both sides of the Atlantic. So this is the business of the Europeans. Well, America have always argued that they want, and this is why I believe that NATO is on the way down. This is the beginning of the end of NATO, because if the Europeans are trying to push the envelope just a little bit more, this might escalate, and this will test the loyalty of the United States. Will America get involved in a long drawn-out war of attrition with Russia, or leave the Europeans to their fate? So this is the question. And if America wants to deploy their assets to the Baltics, or maybe to the Black Sea, I don't see that happening. You know, America, the Russians control the Black Sea, and they want to get Turkey involved in it. We are talking about a bloodbath. We are talking about the whole planet being bombed back to the Dark Ages or to the Stone Age. So we have to be very careful, and Ukraine could be the beginning of the end of the world as it is today. I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen, because these countries are nuclearly armed. United States, France, England, Russia, all of them have what it takes to liquidate each other. Informative, you know, and I give updates, and I do a lot of geopolitics. You know, while myself and Shu were talking, I wanted to bring in the Zangezur corridor. There's the corridor called the Zangezur corridor that the talks are involved in with the Azeris, and this would affect Armenia, Iran, and Russia. And if a war with Iran starts, Turkey and the Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, will all get involved in a war around the Caspian Sea. And again, it's not in the best interest of the United States to go to war with Iran. The Israelis are encouraging the Americans that they've done the job already, that they took down the air defense system of Iran, that Iran is going to be a cakewalk, that they will walk into Iran, bomb Iran back to the Dark Ages and move out. Well, it's not as simple as that. So, but if Iran is going to fight back and Iran starts targeting US military bases in Kuwait, in Oman, in Qatar, and the Saudi oil fields owned by Aramco. Aramco, by the way, some of the shares of Aramco is owned by BlackRock. I want you guys to understand that. So there's an economic war that will be waged on the United States and on the rest of the world. If those oil fields in Saudi Arabia are targeted and hit, the oil prices will go up to $1,000 per barrel. Is that per barrel? Yeah. And then we are going to see the beginning of the end of the dominance of America. America's hegemony will be gone. And that will open the corridor to conflict all around Central Asia. If you destabilize Iran, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Balochistan, which is in Pakistan, by the way, you know, that place is already facing a lot of turmoil. So again, this is about geopolitics, and the Chinese will take advantage of that and walk into Taiwan. I don't think America can sustain war on multiple fronts. Well, America is counting on Japan and South Korea and all these other countries that have levied tariffs on, that see clearly that America is not dependable and reliable, so to speak. The Philippines is caught in between with all these American naval bases in the Philippines, you know, from the north to the south, because the Philippines, the Philippines is divided into 3 regions. You have the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Yeah, these tariffs, we have limited friends, exactly. So take a look at the map. Philippines, in the north, you have Luzon. That is where the capital city, Manila, is. And if you go back to the Second World War, by the way, that America got involved with, for those of you that are familiar and are students of World War II, the Japanese, not just the invasion of Manchuria and the bombing of Hawaii, you know, that dragged in the America, it was also the death march of Bataan. How many of you are familiar? Because America had a presence there at that point. You know, check up the death march of Bataan. The Philippines was also involved in that conflict. Okay, so you need to understand that. And if there's any war in Indo-Pacific as well, the Philippines will be dragged in. They call them the Indo-China countries will be dragged in. And remember why they went to war in Vietnam as well, is to maintain that presence. Because the French were defeated and bloodied in Indochina, and the left and America wanted to ensure that it remains the dominant player to control the Strait of Malacca, to control the important shipping and water routes that makes America the dominant power in the world today. Because America dominates and controls the sea. And that was why they also went to war in Vietnam, in Laos, and Cambodia. So although people think that the Vietnam War was a disaster, America got and achieved most of their objectives in Vietnam. And this is why America is the dominant hegemon today, because they control the most important trading routes in the world. And by doing that, they force other countries to trade in the assets that they see fit, i.e. using the dollar as the fiat currency. So all of this is about economics. It is very important for us to note this. It's all about economics. We don't know for sure. You're talking about the Philippines. China has the largest navy in the world as we speak. I'll take you back to 2014 when Xi Jinping came to power after Hu Jintao. And there's a top naval officer, the Chinese naval officer called Real Admiral Luo Yuan. You guys can check up the name. Real Admiral Luo Yuan. Can somebody write that in the comments? Real Admiral Luo Yuan. He said that China should target and sink one of America's aircraft carrier in the Pacific to unalive 5,000 American personnel. That what the Americans fear the most is taking casualties. Think about it. So the Chinese are not scared of going to war with America. And by the way, those aircraft carriers, there are a lot of stories about it, that these are actually white elephant projects and they are sitting ducks. And this is why China is not building them, because it's useless. You can have some of these little frigates and destroyers, combat, fast-moving, what do you call them? Fast-moving war boats or warships that can actually do a damage to the aircraft carrier and sink it. So this was the position of Real Admiral Luo Yuan at that point. And on the whole fleet, I don't know whether it's just on the aircraft carrier, but on the whole supporting fleet, it has a total of about between 5,000 to 6,000 personnel on board. And if China is going to do that and sink and take out the lives of 5,000 American personnel, that would be a declaration of war. Well, the Chinese they said it in 2014, and they are monitoring the situation, and this is why they are building some of this artificial reef. You know, in the Sprat, or in the area around what they call the Spratly Island, which is disputed between, I think the Vietnamese are disputing it, they're claiming it, the Philippines is claiming it, and China. Good luck getting close to those chips. Well, Leah Lane, I don't know about that. You don't really know for sure until it's tested. Okay, all of this is hypothetical. So if the Chinese are saying that they have the ability to sink those giant ships, and you are saying it's impossible because of the science behind it, or because of what you know about some of those assets, naval assets. Well, the Chinese have something that they believe can sink those ships and take them down. But doing that will also be a declaration of war if they do that preemptively. It's going to drag in the Americans into a war with China in the Indo-Pacific and in the South China Sea, in fact. So, but you're saying good luck with bringing them down. Well, of course, there will be casualties on the Chinese side, but again, you need to understand that America does not have a leg to stand on, especially if they are carrying out an expeditionary mission. There's a difference, and there are just few countries around the world that can do what America is doing, carrying out this expeditionary mission to different areas around the world. It doesn't give you the same line of logistic and support. For instance, if China is going to go all the way to attack American assets in Panama or whatever, it's going to be difficult for them to win. And America is trying to do the same thing all the way in the Pacific, albeit them having assets in Hawaii, in what's the name of this other place? Guam. Guam, and they have a base in Okinawa in Japan, and they have a base in Seoul, and they have these naval bases in the Philippines, with all the payload that they have saved or stored to fight for a period of 6 or 7 months. I don't know how long those supplies or the payload that they have there will last, if it is a long drawn out war of attrition. Well, the Chinese can continue to resupply and keep their industries churning out the supplies that they need. America will have to go back to Washington to do that. not Washington, to mainland America to be able to do that. So this is just my take. You know, all of this is my perspective, is my point of view. So it's not going to be a war fought in 10 days. It's an expedition. Look at the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's been going on for a very long time, 4 years. And the Russians are saying, well, hang on a second, this is a war of attrition. We are not in a rush. This war can go on for 15 years and the Russians are comfortable. Well, the leader, Europe is not the same, because again, Putin can stay in power for the next 10 or 15 years. The European leaders will have to make an argument for them to be re-elected, which is a big disadvantage because they have this democratic model. Well, you're saying that the institutions will largely remain, but at a point, there will be a fatigue within the European populace, you know, to support this conflict with Russia. And they're going to give up. Like, hang on a second, why the hell are we spending billions of dollars to fight against the Russians, to prop up a corrupt government in Kiev? And they're seeing Olena Zelenskaya and her people, that's the wife of Zelensky, spending all this money in Paris, lavishly, buying diamonds and gold worth millions of dollars, buying houses, buying yachts, and young people in Ukraine are being forced to the front line to lose their lives. Why did we get to this position in the first place? Now the Russians control 28% of Ukrainian land. It was not like that in the lead up to the war in 2022 or thereabout. How did we get to this place? I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that this shouldn't have happened in the first place. How did we get to this place where you have north of 1.5 million people, and this is the number we're hearing, it could be more. How did we get to this place in the first place? So the point I'm making is that if the Europeans are trying to drag America into a long drawn out war of attrition with Russia and Europe, and Israel is asking America again to come and attack Iran, to have this long drawn out war of attrition in the Persian Gulf, and China is going to take advantage of the situation. And by the way, America is banking on India. India is not interested in fighting with China. They have their own dispute in Ladakh, which is a colonial legacy by the British, by the way. Both of them understand the rules of the game. You know, they're having their skirmishes in the Himalayas, fighting over some strip of land and territory, which is very strategic and important because of the positioning of that place. And I can understand. You can check up Ladakh. Ladakh is one of the 7 union territories of India. So India have 26 states and 7 union territories. Yeah, maybe America should start caring more about the United States. America already have this enormous power and largesse. And wealth. America is very rich, so I don't know. And maybe they'll have to project power as well abroad to show up the base at home, you know, because if America would not want to see its influence decline on one hand, but if it continues to wage these wars and engage in conflicts all over the world, it will get to a point of decline. I'm sorry. This cannot continue forever. Beirut, so. Thank you, Leah. Oh, man. Hey, I hate having these conversations lately because it drains me out. Maybe, right, they're wrongs. Exactly, America. Yeah, absolutely. America having multinational corporations. It's not just the United States, it's the Europeans. And the way I see it is that a bunch of European elites in power in Europe are the ones in power in the United States. And these same Europeans are the ones in power, I believe, in Israel. Their interests are all tied to their, the political interest is all tied to their economic interest. Change is always good. We love these conversations. I know. Maybe I should do more of this. By the way, this is why Shui told me she had to end the live stream, because I think she wanted to get like a copy of the video. Because for me, if I continue the conversation for a long time, sometimes I do these conversations and I would love to get the copy of it and put on my Facebook page or my YouTube. And I'm not able to do that. Yeah, in some cases, yeah. Yeah, maybe I need to download this video and Messi, thank you so much, Rose. Appel, like some people have been going on my stream for like a year and a half. Some of them have probably not heard me talk. Some of them are like, who's this guy hosting stream, just sitting down there, opening his mouth and laughing, and people are quarreling on his live stream. He doesn't even know anything about the topic, being Israel Palestine. There's an Israeli guy that has been coming on my stream for a long time. He's never had me talk before, or he's never had me really discuss any of the topics, so he believes I don't know shit about it because I'm from Africa. And he believes, that's what he believed until he came on my stream that one day and I was talking with one of the Ariel or something like that. Like here in America, if we even consider talking about this, yeah, I understand because a lot of nationalists and believers in the American project and the American dream and the fact that you guys have all this power, so you have your own point of view. But what you need to understand is that there's not just one point of view. There are different point of views, and because you are speaking from a position of strength, you think that it is universal. What you think that whatever you're saying should be preeminent. It's almost like you're the one with the gospel and we should listen. Well, there's a different narrative, and look, this is the way we think about the United States in Africa. Most African countries are far more scared of the French than the Americans. Not like we're not scared of, not like we don't have a problem with the United States. We think about America as the elephant and the French as the fox. The French understand the society in Africa. They love to learn about it. They speak the language. They've been here. They understand the nitty-gritty. They know who is a Tubu, who is a Tuareg, who is a Bedouin. They know who is a Falata, a Fulani, Hausa, Zagawa. And they understand the language and they know the mentality and the mindset and the psychology of Africans. So they are far more dangerous to us. And this is why, you see, the disdain towards the French. Meanwhile, America believes that everything is about democracy. It's about speaking from the top and everybody should listen. Well, America said this, and it's human rights and democracy and the American interest and values and universal values and liberal capitalist democratic model and the right of minorities. So they speak in this very orthodox way, you understand? It's predictable. This is the old script from the 80s and the 70s and the 50s and the Cold War. It's still the same narrative. So a lot of them have not acquainted themselves with the reality on the ground. They do not understand the psychic and the mindset of the Africans. They know nothing about them. Kamala Harris came to Ghana and spoke to Africans. We don't understand what she's talking about. She's not in consonance with the reality in Africa. She went to Zambia. Oh, man. Kamala Harris went to Zambia, landed in an airport in Lusaka, took a runway to the presidential palace in Lusaka, and started lecturing the government in Lusaka about democracy, which is the standard thing they do if they come to Africa, and lecturing them about the influence of the Chinese in Africa. Well, that airport you used in Lusaka was built by the Chinese. That runway you took to the presidential palace was built by the Chinese. The presidential palace that they were having that speech was refurbished by the Chinese. So instead of America to be preaching democracy, they should be competing with the Chinese in terms of the things that the African people need. We are not asking for NGOs and democracy, more rights of minorities, like these are standard talking points. It is, they are bereft of any knowledge and idea of the reality on the ground. This is why you never hear, the Chinese people never talk about Africa. But they are here in Africa and they're taking advantage of the situation because they know what the African people want. And they ask them, this is what we know you want. You want roads, you want collaboration in technological transfer, you want this and that. They're building schools, they're building hospitals. And they're getting contracts. And they're making a lot because the African market has a population of 1.2 billion people. It's enormous. Well, I'm not saying that the Chinese are the best, but this is what they are doing. They don't involve in politics. They're not asking countries to be bombed in the name of democracy. They are not asking to bomb countries to remove hijab from the head of women, like the Americans are saying. That's not what they are doing. And the Russians are saying, no, we want to partner with you. We know what the French are doing to you. We don't want to dictate for you who you want to have as your president. We want to give you, if you need arms, we can sell to you, we can supply to you. If you need us to train you, we can do that. So politically, the Russians are very astute and understand the mindset, because they are not in the same power position as America, because America have a lot on its hand. So they go and read the standard procedure or the standard test from the 1910s. This is what they are still reading to African leaders when they come to Africa and they stand on the podium and they open the book and they start reading about democracy and human rights. People walk away, they're bored. What the fuck are these people talking about? Nobody wants to hear that. Because we know that you're not going to Riyadh and preaching to the Saudis about democracy. No, you're not going there. So when Kamala Harris, without knowing anything about Zambia, walks into Zambia to lecture the Zambian government about China, without knowing that that airport she used was built by the Chinese, the presidential palace was refurbished by the Chinese as a goodwill gesture. This is soft power. And well, you come to Libya and say, the best way to institute democracy and to civilize these Africans is to bomb democracy into their brain, bomb democracy into their head so that they can learn and stop being barbaric and backward. This is what the Americans tell us. Well, you say, well, is it just about Africa? Why do we have take this exception to the United States of America? No, a lot of African people actually love America because they see a lot of connection, particularly the Anglophone ones, even the Francophone ones, because what America was very good at is soft power. The fact that they were giving loans to all those African countries in the 80s, but now people have take exception to those loans, and that they were collaborating in science and technology, and even the culture. There's an assimilation in terms of culture, Hollywood. These are the things that a lot of people connect with. NBA, National Basketball Association. These things are what people in Africa connect to and like America. Soft power. Very important. You did it before. That's why you gain a lot of influence. And now you think the best way is to bomb your way to power. Well, good luck with doing that. And Trump started a trade war with China. From the beginning, I said, I know how this is going to end. Trade war with China, with the Europeans, with China, with Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Venezuela, tariff on everybody. And then the Chinese refused to budge, refused to negotiate, refused to talk to the Americans. Both of them are hurting each other's economy. And China is saying, well, we have a different market. America does not have a manufacturing base. We do, and we will continue to supply to our new markets that were found in Africa and in Asia. By the way, those countries you have imposed tariff on, like Vietnam, and those countries, Vietnam has big population. Burma has a population of over 100 million. So these are giant markets that the Chinese can actually flood their goods in. But of course, they need the American market, and we can talk about the reasons why they need that. But they are not going to starve. But we are going to see the effect of this tariff and the slowdown of trade between China and America and the rest of the world in the next 2-3 months. We'll see the impact of that. So the point I'm making is that America starts a trade war with China. China refused to acquiesce, to budge, to cooperate with America in order to give concessions to Trump to make his ego feel good, to make him feel better, and to give him, to massage his ego. And then Trump and America turns around and say, you in Africa, you in Pakistan, you in India, we don't want you to trade with China. We don't want to see you talking to the Chinese. It's either you choose us or you choose the Chinese. Oh man, bro. This is exactly what they are doing. So when people in the US wants to talk from their point of view, they should understand that the rest of the world is monitoring what is going on closely. Although most of them still fear America, still want to be on the good side of the America. If they have the opportunity today, they will stab the US in the back. They don't like America. They are only doing that for interest and strategic reasons. So if a war breaks out on multiple fronts today, the Russians need a very light footprint in Africa for those African countries to begin. You will see a fallout. Military coups will break out in Africa in 5 minutes. If there's an outbreak of World War III, those democratic governments that are corrupt and fat and lazy and slow and ruled by Washington and Brussels will be decapitated and removed from office and will be replaced by revolutionary forces that will side with the Russians and the Chinese immediately. This is the hard fact. This is the naked truth that the government in Washington is not telling you. The government in Brussels telling you about democracy. Well, the French are there occupying islands in occupying territories, in Asia Pacific, if you like. Why the hell is that happening? The French are interested in decolonizing Ukraine. They are interested in protecting the territorial integrity of Ukraine, while in Africa, they want the Africans to remain a slave colony for them to exploit resources. It's interesting. This is the perception, this is the perceptive, or this is the point of view of those of us in the global south. This is how we perceive the West. I'm not saying the West is bad. A lot of Africans go there. I mean, look, you've built a very beautiful system, and I think you should find the right balance to maintain the system and keep your power without throwing your hands out too much. Africa does not want to sever ties with America. Africa also wants to do business with the rest of the world. So if Trump is going to come out and say, it's either you trade with us or you trade with China, that is a testament to what I've been saying all along about the this behavior of the United States. So what do you think is going to happen in the next few months? Yeah, I think there might be some level of de-escalation, particularly with Iran. I don't know, they might have some kind of tentative agreement, because that place is a boiling point, it's a flashpoint. And with Ukraine, Steve Witkoff is doing this shuttle diplomacy to Russia, to France. I don't know whether he'll go to Kiev, because Zelensky is inviting the US President Donald Trump to come to Kiev or something like that. He's trying to do this sham diplomacy to try and woo Trump, because, I mean, he wants to remain in power. That's what it is, basically. He wants to remain in power if a deal is done and the conflict comes to an end. That is what he wants. But, I mean, I'm sorry, he should leave. But he wants to stay in power, if that is the case. And going further, I think it's a very volatile period. I don't know what will happen in 3 months or 4 months. But if we are able to ride the storm, weather the storm for the next 6 months, we might see de-escalation in so many areas. America have already announced that they want to withdraw some of their contingent from Syria, which is a good move. You know, they know that the Turks are the main players now in Syria, and the American presence there, continued presence there, is of no use, because the Kurds already had an agreement with the government in Damascus. And hopefully, by the way, Israel is saying that they will maintain their military presence indefinitely in Syria, Lebanon, and in Gaza. No, he's not going to stay in power after this comes to an end. Zelensky is definitely not going to stay in power.